All right, welcome everybody. Again, we have podcast number 6, which I was thinking this last week, but I'm going to say it. Podcast number 6 means people are still listening, Ross.
Still.
So
Gaining followers.
Gaining followers. So what's up, everybody? As you know, this is Chris Burandt. Wide open with Chris Burandt with my buddy Ross Robinson. And what's crazy is we have actually we're moving up, Ross, and I'll tell you why.
Please do.
Well, we have our first request for a live audience,
okay.
So we have a live audience today.
Yeah.
It's actually my mom and dad. My parents.
Well, they're the best supporters. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
My parents actually came up for the weekend, and we're gonna knock one of these out before we go have some fun on the snow. Which it's crazy. It's June 1st, and we're still going to go play on the snow. But so with this podcast, if you guys tuned in last week in episode number 5, we started off talking about sled setup. It's been probably our number one requested topic to talk about and to chat about. And so we didn't get it all done in one.
No.
And so we're going to chat about some more stuff. Just a real quick mini recap. The big things we talked about was more or less chassis setup, being comfortable with your handlebars and handlebar controls, not settling for how your sled comes from the dealer, because sometimes that isn't correct. And we talked about personal preferences on front end width, where we want our skis, suspension setup, all of that fun stuff.
Yep. So we really kind of just covered essentially the basics on a stock snowmobile. If you're going to put $0 into it, and then today we can talk a little bit more about some basic aftermarket stuff, but also just cover some more of the nitty gritty when it comes to sled setup that people are kind of unaware of.
Yeah, and I think where we should start with that is probably one that is severely overlooked, as much, if not more, than the handlebar setup and control setup, and that's clutching. And clutching can be as complex as you want to make it, but in the end, on a stock sled, you just on a Polaris, you just need to put the right dang weights in.
Yeah.
And so it's very simple, very easy. We actually have videos, I believe, up on our YouTube channel of how to change weights, how to change weight bushings when the weights start to wear, and all of those things. But we see it time and time again when people come to our place to do a ride, and they've invested all of this time, money, and effort to come to Colorado and to want to learn.
Yep.
And then they show up and on the first day, I can hear the sled is not running good, and I'm like, dude, what do you have in here for weights? Well, I don't know.
What are weights?
What it's whatever the dealer set it up with.
Yeah.
And most of the time they're running stock weights at 12,000 feet when the sled was set up for 6,000 to 8,000, and the sled is running like junk. And so what we always say is all the things that you can control, you need to make sure that those things are ideal, because there's so many factors that you can't control, like how deep the snow is, and then the lack of skill set that you're trying to work on. Those are all the things that we're trying to help you with. But your conditioning, your sled setup, all of those things you can control, and those need to be on point.
Yeah. So it's a good practice too, if you are buying a new sled or a used sled, to check the weights and see what is in there. And if you're buying a new sled from your dealer, asking your dealer, did you change the weights, or does this come standard from the factory? Like what's the setup here? So, because that is huge. I mean, especially if you know how to clutch it and put the correct weights in it, I mean, it could waste a ride for you if it's not clutch or set up correctly the very first go around. So that's essentially what we see is guys show up here, not clutch properly, and their first day isn't as good as it should be because they're just not weighted properly.
Yeah, and we've learned our lesson there. I
Yeah.
mean, when guys show up with their own sleds and we give them just the quick quiz, like, what do you got in there for weights? Are you ready for elevation? And in just a couple quick questions, we can figure out, hey, you need to get your sled in here so we can get this thing dialed so you have a good time. Sounds like you're close. If they actually know what weight is in there, that's a bonus.
Yeah,
we're doing good. But I'm an RPM Nazi. I mean, I
know.
I cannot stand being low on RPM, and whether it's because it's the wrong weights or a worn out belt, or it was funny this year. Ended up, I had a roller go bad in my primary clutch, and I was up riding and with a group. Kyle was my sweep guy, and throughout the day I could feel it. And this is just because I've been snowmobiling all my life and I can feel these things. And I don't settle for it being just okay.
Right.
So the sled I was riding that day, I felt I was losing RPMs, not all the time, but sometimes. And we were like at lunch or something, and I look over at Kyle and I'm like, hey, I think I got a roller sticking. We need to check it tonight. And he's like, he didn't even think anything of it. And we get in the shop that night and he's like, how did you know that was it? Because, and it was just one of those things like Kyle really reminds me of me when I was young and dumb. And it's because Kyle just like, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to ride through it. I'm going to just make up for it in my ability and not really care. But the thing is, and this is what I try to tell people, and I've really harped on, I remember I was really strong with this with San when he was here, is your snowmobile is constantly talking to you. It's constantly talking to you.
Yeah.
And whether you want to listen to it or not, or ignore it, that's your decision. But when everything is perfect, your sled is happy, you're building RPMs, again, we have no excuses. The sled is performing the way it should, and now everything relies on you. However, when either it's a poor setup or something's not quite right, now we have these issues that cause potential problems of getting stuck, or maybe even worse, maybe a failure out in the backcountry, and then you're not snowmobiling, you're trying to get your snowmobile out,
right?
And that stinks. So kind of veering off topic here a little bit, but just remember, your snowmobile is a crazy, highly volatile machine,
right,
that needs attention.
Yeah.
And no matter how good they come from the factory, how much money we put into them or pay for them, you still have to take care of it, listen to it, and maintain it.
Yeah. And so kind of going back, talking about just putting weights in stock sleds from the factory is really all the average rider should do to their sled, clutching wise, if you have no other modifications done. Once you start entering gearing and engine modifications and all these other aspects, then your clutching changes around that, typically speaking. And it's always great to ask people who have the time and experience in testing clutching. I usually go to you for that because you have way more experience and knowledge of it. So, and we get a lot of people who they like to tinker and play with clutching and stuff. And for me, it's not so much. I would rather just go ride.
Mm-hmm.
Want to get a good setup and go ride the heck out of it because I want to ride. I don't want to mess with it too much. So just being careful of the reason that we just want you to throw weights in them is because that's what Polaris does, is they test it for that setup.
Yep.
They don't have anything else going on with the sled at the time. So just something for you guys to think about on your personal sled. And it goes back to kind of aftermarket and all of sled setup. It's very easy to mess it up.
Yeah, it is. And I think you brought up a good point. Like for you, if you're down 50 RPM, 100 RPM, like that isn't the end of the world for you, and it doesn't bother you. You just have a good setup that is consistent, runs good, and you're going to be fine.
Right.
And for me, I like the aspect of the tinkering and just fine tuning and making that thing spot on perfect every single time.
Yeah.
But that it takes a lot of time and a lot of feel for that. And there's a lot of great aftermarket setups out there for specific locations, but I have found a lot, everyone's like, oh man, you have to try this clutch setup, and I get all excited, and then I bring it to 12,000 feet and I'm like, this is absolutely horrendous, and I go back to the stock whatever, and it's better. And so that's again part of the aspect that I enjoy, especially working with the partners that we have, the SLPs, even Bikeman weights. We've worked with the magnet weights on that, and then Vogue stuff on the turbos. On the turbo side, there's a very noticeable difference on his clutch setup turbo wise versus the standard one that comes in the Boondocker kit. So lots of fun stuff on the clutching, but in the end, just make sure that your sled is pulling RPM that it was designed to pull, and life will be way better for you. Yeah, way easier. And so
and if peak RPM, if you ride an 800, that's like 8250.
Yep.
If you're riding an 850, that's more 84.
Yeah, 83
to 84.
Yep, 83, 84. Yep.
It's not 7900.
No.
That FYI.
Yeah. But it's also, it's not 8600 either.
Yeah.
There's, and again, we could do a whole podcast on the theory of dang clutching, but you're
gonna have to do that one solo.
Yeah, exactly. There is a happy medium. You can build too much RPMs, and you can build not enough RPMs. There's a sweet spot that the motors like to run. That's where you need to be. And on the Polaris side of things, it's very easy. You have a 6 to 8 setup that Polaris recommends, an 8 to 10, and a 10 to 12. Throw some weights in. It's fairly simple on that side to get just a good setup.
Yep.
So that kind of covers clutching, and let's kind of keep rolling with the stock sled.
Yeah.
And so there's so many fun things that we can talk about, which that's why we love this podcast. We can go down the road of big bores versus turbos, and what about a single pipe? I heard SLP's got these twin pipes, which by the way I get to go ride on Monday. I'm pretty excited about that.
I'll let him do the validating, and then he'll be like, yeah, they're good.
Yeah, they're good. But I think with this one, we're gonna stick with the stock base.
Yep.
And the most you can get out of a stock sled. Yep. And so one thing that goes hand in hand with clutching is gearing. I think so. So rewind back in 2011, 12, 13. So basically 11 through 15 in the pro RMK days, we were seeing some huge benefits with gearing down the sled. The sleds were, you could do 85 miles an hour with a pro RMK.
Yeah.
Well, what the heck do you need to go 85 miles an hour for? I want to go
lakes.
Lakes. Yeah. I want to go 0 to 50 in a hurry. I want the throttle response to be instant. So when I'm up on edge and in those trees, I want everything to be very crisp and quick.
Yep.
And so gear downs on those pros made a big difference. And then we started kind of the Axis chassis with the how everything was working there. The gear downs were I think they were not as big of a difference as the pro, but they were still definitely a difference. We ended up tweaking some clutching to make that even perform just as good as what it did in the pro.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now fast forward to the 850. So I did the same thing. First thing I did is throw a gear down kit on an 850, thinking everything, well, it worked on the 800. I need to put it on the 850. Everything is going to be groovy. I put it on the 850, first ride out this season, and I'm like, I think this thing's slow. And so there were a lot of things going on for a first ride. And this is where I make mistakes often because I'm impatient. I try a lot of things at once.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting better at that, of trying just one thing. Did it work? Yes or no? Instead of putting this whole conglomeration of things together. And so anyway, put the gear down kit, put a silencer on, throw some clutching in it, or just weights, and go ride it. And I honestly didn't, and I had a stock sled to compare it to.
Yep.
And so it didn't it didn't perform like I wanted to. One, it was still in break-in. Two, we didn't really have clutching dialed in. So there were a lot of variables. So I actually shelved it, put the stock gear down kit or stock gearing back in it, and got back to where I needed to be, understanding what the sled needed before changing everything at once. Another big one was working with Kurt at Kurt's Polaris. So Kurt is who we get the gear down kits from, and he what's cool about working with Kurt is he is a tree rider. He's from Sealy Lake, Montana, and is on the snow a bunch and has a good feel for the sleds. Mm-hmm. And so mid-season, it was actually right after I jacked my wrist. It was like the day after. This really sucked, kind of. So I jacked my wrist. I'm like in a cast. I can't move my arm, and Kurt was coming down because he said, I have got the setup for the gear down, and I want to make sure it works at your elevation.
Yeah.
Which is another cool thing, right?
Yep.
Have a sponsor who says, I'm getting in the truck and I'm coming to your place because I want you to not just sell these just to sell them. I want you to sell them because they work, and the validation side of it is really important to us when we put our name on something. So Kurt comes down. I'm riding a GIMP cast. I could barely ride, but that day I was like, dude, we have something now. And we had a stock sled and the gear down sled with a clutch setup. And that was the big thing that we found. Just slapping a gear down kit on the 850 didn't do what we needed performance wise. So it went kind of hand in hand with the clutch kit that he's developed and worked on with the gear down. So we have a very strong package with, again, trying to get the most out of a stock motor.
Yeah.
Yep. So you had, I'm going to go back to the day. And the day was me, you, and Kyle.
Yeah.
Cottonwood.
Yeah.
Go towards Polaris Bowl, hook the left.
Yeah.
And where I just made fun of you guys all day.
Yeah.
And you are like, cheater sled. Well, I was on the cheater sled.
Yeah.
But so that was the day that you rode my sled for the first time with the gear down and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And your sled, had a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But you were lacking just a couple of the things. What kind of give the listeners kind of your perspective on, you ride 6 days a week, so you have a good feel of your sled, and then to ride something with that setup.
Well, there's the two biggest things about that sled are the gear down. That the two differences at that time was the gear down and the lightweight parts. So pairing those two together, it really made a huge difference in just how the sled went forward and got on top and went and climbed and did the things that you want it to do and handled with a lot of ease. So that's why that was when I was like, yeah, this is a pretty legit setup. And this is always how it goes. They make like 4 of them. Chris gets 1 of them. I get none of them. He sells 3 of them. And then I got to wait like 3 months to get mine. So I finally get mine later, and it sure enough made a huge difference in my sled as well in gearing. And the biggest part was, the clutching was totally different. If you talked clutching with another guy who was very well versed in clutching, he'd be like, why are you running that setup? Until you really explain the whole system to him. And even for me, when we were first looking at it, I was like, not really sure about it, and I think you were probably the same way until we actually got time on it with Kurt here.
Yeah, and I think what's pretty cool about that too was it was something. And again, with the clutching kit and the gear down kit, you're about $1,000, and so it needs to be something where you don't just say, I think it's better.
Yeah.
For $1,000, it better be like, this is awesome. I can't believe I haven't done this on my other sleds.
Yeah.
And, that's really what it did for me is it instantly woke up my sled, gave me quicker track speed, quicker response. And, that type of terrain that we were riding where you almost got to the steep part, That was the line.
Where Kyle almost got the C
Yeah.
part. I got there.
You got there. Yeah. But
we got stuck together first.
But that was the terrain that sled just flat out does silly things because of, like you said, the quicker response, the quicker track speed to get you up on top.
Yep.
The lightweight stuff helps in that for sure. But just that rippiness is where it's at for tree riding for sure. It was funny. Andrew, Andrew, unfortunately, bottom of the pole, right? Bottom of the totem pole. So he's like the last one to get a kit because you've been here long enough. You totally described what I do, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh,
Kurt sends 4 for the guides.
Yeah.
And I take 1, and everybody wants them. So then I sell 3.
Yeah.
And I said, well, Kurt, I need some more gear down kits. I sold them all, and the guys didn't get any because I sold theirs. Okay, all right. I'm gonna send you some more.
Yeah. Well, Kyle had one for some reason. Kyle had one of the test ones or something that was a little bit different, or I don't know exactly. But then he only was gonna send like 1 more or something, and I had to Andrew and I were about to have WrestleMania in the shop over it.
Which you'd get your ass kicked.
Oh, but.
And so anyway, you get it, and then it was like every couple days, Andrew. So is the kit coming? It's coming, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, Andrew, it is coming. And I think what's pretty cool about Andrew is he saw the benefit of it for. He keeps working on his riding style. It was cool to see where he started at the beginning of the season, but where he ended was, getting more aggressive and more comfortable and all this stuff. But he was the one that really, he's like, this totally changed my sled. I thought my sled ripped before. This isn't even comparable.
Yeah.
And that's for someone who, I would say just hasn't been on the snow as much. He's a great guide and does awesome for us. I'm excited for him coming back next year. But, this was his first time getting a ton of time on the snow. So it's cool to hear him say something like that.
Yeah, yeah. So the kit is a clutch kit and a gear down kit together. So, and it's how much total?
Yeah, it's $1,000.
$1,000. So a pretty good chunk of change. For a lot of the sleds that we build for customers and a lot of our clientele, it's not a crazy expense, but there are certainly the stock guys out there who put all their money into their sled. And so don't be discouraged if you don't want to drop $1,000 on it, because your sled is still an animal, right? And it's still amazing, and make sure you have the right weights in it, like we said, and run it that way. But it's just, and it's preference too. If you ride... If you didn't ride the trees at all, if you were just like big open meadow just ripping, you might not feel the difference as much. You would out of the hole.
To your point, if I was not the type of rider that I am, and I was more like the average mountain rider who loves the more open stuff on the deep pow. I'm a deep pow guy, right? I would not, and my budget was $1,000.
Yeah,
I would buy shocks instead of a gear down kit.
Yeah.
And so that's the type of, and I think that's to your point of, it works really well for these things.
Yeah.
Maybe you wouldn't see the benefit of the $1,000 upgrade if this is your type of riding style.
Yeah.
And that's, again, that's what we love with our YouTube channel and social media and the podcast is, we get your guys' feedback, and it gives us some stuff to talk about and answer and help you make smart decisions with your money on what you purchase.
Right.
And so this leads us really good into the next one.
Yeah.
And the next one is we're going to talk suspension. So podcast 5, we talked about how to set up your stock suspension.
Yeah.
And we didn't cover aftermarket suspension.
No.
And so, okay, so this one is one that is, it's a little tough because suspension is expensive.
Yeah,
it's actually really expensive. Can be, but we've all talked about it.
Yeah.
If there's only one thing you could do to your snowmobile, turbo. Name them all, right? Turbo, lightweight, just everything. what would you do if you only had one?
Yeah. Suspension.
It's suspension.
Yeah. It's just the cold, hard truth. It's just like you can't properly set up suspension.
Yep. And it's funny, every time that we and this happens every year, because first ride of the year, I get on a new sled. It's got stock shocks on it. The stock shocks are they're new, so they're fresh and good oil and clean. And
yep.
I'm like, you know what, this isn't too bad. And then I go and I ride one of our sleds that has our setup in it, and I'm like, whoa, okay, I don't really feel like riding that. And so, and this is not to bag on the manufacturers. This is just purely the fact that the reason that I like the suspension that I like is because I have specifically set it up for the type of riding that I do. Off trail, tree riding, getting on edge, getting up on top of the snow. And I touched base on that on last week's podcast. Yeah. So again,
well, that's why we set the stock suspension to do that right there. That's what right. We're trying to get it to do. So when you just throw a whole new set of hardware at it that is specifically built for it, then you're in the money.
In the money. Yep, exactly. And so I think, the biggest compliment and the coolest things that I've heard from clients is, we've built $40,000 snowmobiles for these guys.
Yeah.
And with carbon and tie and turbo and just everything. And these things are works of art. And the first thing that they say is, I cannot believe how good the suspension is. And I can't believe I have been riding with stock suspension. And it's funny. We say the first thing that we do to every sled is suspension. Most people, it's the exact opposite. The right. last thing I would do is buy suspension. It already has suspension on it.
Right. Yep. Well, it's just like asking anybody who races moto at all, send in your forks, send in your shocks, get them valved to, get it all set up for you. And that's the same thing, for us and so many people. I mean, it's like, I always use the example of my dad. He won't do anything. Like if I was like, Dad, you should put a gear down, can you say? He'd be like, no. I have to change his weights if we're changing weights, but he will put suspension on it.
Yeah.
Because he's ridden it, and now every time he buys a new sled, he orders suspension because he just it just is so much. It's plush for him. It's comfortable, better in all conditions for him all around. And he's not us either. Yeah. So that just goes to speak for it.
Well, and it's funny, and that's what sparked me to do. We it's not through Fox. It's literally through me. At the store here is I have a money back guarantee on your shocks, and the reason is because so like a set of QS3s $2,800, a set of float 3s $1,600. This is a big amount of money for your sled purchase, and so again, if it doesn't work and you just say, I think it's a little better, well, that's not how I roll, And so I have yet to get a set of shocks back that I couldn't get the guy tuned in and happy with his purchase. Yeah. And it's because of that. And your dad is a perfect example. He would never go and buy suspension on his own. But right. He came out here and throughout the 3 days that him and his buddies were here, we put him on a bunch of different sleds, and you said, "Here, Dad, go ride this."
Yeah.
Right? And he's like, "Whoa. That is a big difference, even for that average mountain rider." And that's the thing is, I constantly hear this at shows or on comments on social media is, I don't know if I had the skill set where I would feel the difference.
Yeah. Can you go down the trail?
Then
you can feel the difference.
Do you ever get your sled on one ski?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those two little things right there. I mean, of course it's, our stuff, of course it's going to be better on the trail. But that's not in the end our main goal is to make our sled better on the trail. Yeah. You didn't buy an RMK to ride the trail. Our sled is easier to get on edge. It's easier to maintain edge. And it gets up on top of the snow better, bar none. So, that's that. And again, we could do a full podcast on aftermarket suspension and we most likely will. We'll talk about that stuff. But just know if it's something that's kind of been in the back of your head of, I've heard things about, this Fox stuff and Air stuff and Burandt stuff. But I don't know, man, it's kind of expensive. It's real simple. Money back guarantee.
Yep.
If you don't like it, didn't make a big difference, send them back.
Yep. And talking about just one kind of thing that I don't hear it a lot, but I think people may think it is your signature shocks are distributed through us, so they all come through us, and they are valved. I sometimes go and help, and we spend 2, 3, 4 days on the snow with Fox validating them.
Yeah, early season, mid season, late season,
to exactly what you want. So it's not just like Fox is like, here's the shock, we put your name on it. It's we're constantly testing and tuning, and we swap a lot of shocks out just to make sure that we're happy with it and there's not something better.
Yep. And actually, it was funny. I was on the phone with Rick at Fox yesterday, and with Chaos coming out with a new shock package, which is really good for a stock sled.
Yep.
But one thing that makes the Chaos do Chaos things is the longer front track shock, and so we were talking about putting something together that I can go try in Chile, which is another really cool thing about being able to ride in July and August, is that we can validate and test some stuff where nobody else is on the snow. So that's pretty exciting to do that. And and I think with our Fox stuff, we have 3 different levels. We have the Float 3s, which is a really good entry-level shock that is just better than the stock stuff, but gets you into real suspension at an affordable price point. And then we got the QS3s, which I run on all of my sleds.
Yeah.
The QS3 gives me adjustability, which I like because, no matter throughout the day and throughout the season, everything is always changing.
Yeah.
When you leave the trail, you want your suspension to do something different as you're going in on the trail versus when you get into the deep stuff and you're riding tree lines and all that stuff. So I personally like the easy adjustability with the QS3 switch on our QS3s. And then, the top of the line, which goes to that exact point of, as conditions change, whether it's throughout the day or the season, we want to be able to adjust to our sled to those conditions.
Yeah.
Well, now we have IQS, which is an electronically controlled it controls all 4 shocks with the touch of a button on the handlebar.
Yeah.
So you can go from soft, medium, firm to now lockout of the rear suspension, all by touching a button. And it's a super cool system. I find myself adjusting the sled way more with that because it's convenient.
Yeah.
With my QS3s, I end up basically, I'm on soft or 1 all the way in on the trail, over the stutter bumps,
Yep.
and then once I get out on the snow, I figure out kind of what the day is like. I'm going to run my fronts on 2. It's a super deep day. I'm going to run lockout in the rear, and I stay in those modes for most part of the day. But what's cool about IQS is you literally just touch the button and it's instant. So it's pretty cool to have those 3 different packages and levels.
Yeah. And that's a cool platform that is paving the way for the future of what things will be like,
Yeah.
They're just kind of the first integration of that technology.
Yeah.
And we can go down that path too when we do the full suspension podcast.
Cool. So we've touched base on clutching.
Yep.
Touched base on gearing, suspension, aftermarket side of things. What would you say? I guess for let's stick with the stock sled. We're gonna have a turbo podcast for sure.
Yep.
We have a lot of stuff to talk about there. But what are we missing here that is another mandatory? I know we have SLP silencer. We like the silencer stuff. I gotta have my cooker.
Yeah.
That type of thing. What in your bag of tricks or your setup are you needing?
Well, I think just if we're looking at a totally stock sled, it almost then transitions into kind of how you operate on it. You can accessorize and things like that. We have different storage solutions that we like. And then, aside from that, really, after you click those basics off, it's just managing a couple things, you know? It's managing belt deflection. Like we have videos on belt deflection, which is super important. Throttle free play. It's, you know, making sure your throttle is nice and snug, so you're not losing that little bit of throttle and that response time. It's making sure your track's tight and you know, well, my tracks, I have this weird sound going on. Well, your track's really loose. They stretch a lot when they're new. So these little, I don't know if you would call them setup things, but they're just, you're constantly managing them to keep your sled set up properly and efficiently, and also it's easier on it. You know, if you run a really loose track, then you're apt to, you know, messing up drivers, messing up drive belts, all that kind of stuff. But
and again, affecting a day.
Yeah. You could even ruin your day just based on these small things. So I think we might have touched on it before, but like when we get on somebody else's snowmobile, we can immediately feel if the belt deflection's off, or if the throttle free play is off, if bar setup is off. So as you spend more time on your sled, you become more particular, or you probably will become more particular on setup.
It's funny you talk about belt deflection, and this goes back to the customer who comes here, and I give him the quick quiz.
Yeah.
What weights do you have in your sled? I don't know. Okay, unload your sled right now. I don't have to go any further in the quiz, right?
Yeah.
So when he unloads his sled, he starts coming up the carpet into the shop, and it's all. I'm like, well, stop, and yeah, you might want to check your belt deflection too. Well, how do you know just from like 6 feet? Well, dude, your sled is like lurching.
Yeah.
And so same customer though, right? Who just bought the snowmobile, just wants to ride it, but we have to listen to the snowmobile.
Yeah.
That isn't right.
Yeah.
So again, one of those things. You talked about something that I overlooked, and suspension again is my number one.
Yeah.
Is my most important. But sled storage, I
it's
couldn't
insane.
ride without my tunnel bag.
No.
Because all the stuff that I have to be prepared in the backcountry for whatever, a sled emergency, a person emergency, or whatever, I carry a lot of stuff, and I plan for the worst, hoping for the best. So, you know, I run the Polaris tunnel bag. It's got my name on it, which is really cool because I've helped design one. And I mean, can you imagine not riding with a tunnel bag?
Yeah. I mean, we have the large lock and ride bags, the Burandt one, like loaded to the brim every day.
You did a cool YouTube video. It's up on your channel.
It's on yours.
Mine, yeah.
Yep.
Of what you carry.
Oh yeah, that's mine.
That's yours,
of
right?
what I actually carry.
Yeah, and I have one too.
Yeah.
Of what I carry as well. So you know, make sure you jump on our YouTube channels so you can kind of see I don't have a tunnel bag. Why do you have a tunnel bag? Yeah. Well, and it's again, we wear Avi bags, but in our Avi bags, we just have our necessities because I don't want that wearing me down all day. I've got this horse that I'm going to pack down and carry all my stuff. Yeah. You know, so the big ones for me are my big tunnel bag. I really like the Sled Solutions handlebar bag. I've ran that thing for many years. You know, so those are my two go-tos that I have to have.
Yeah, yeah, and that's essentially what I'm running as well. And you know, just being able to have stuff right where you need it, close to you on the bars, and then, you know, the majority of your things, and then in your backpack, things that if you lost your sled or, like, you know, something crazy happened and you don't have your sled anymore, you can still survive with just the things on your back too. So some just necessities and, you know, things that you would need on your back, keeping it light and keeping the fatigue off you. So, but, you know, one thing that I just saw actually talking about setup, and I referred to Moto guys. I just saw a video of arc levers hand filing Eli Tomac's levers for him. Like, so if you think we're ridiculous, though, you know, it's another level. And you know, everybody that does it for a living, it's like, imagine going to work if you were a contractor without your truck set up to go build the house.
Yeah, you show up in the rental car and you went to Home Depot and got some things.
Yeah.
You'll get the job done, but it's going to suck.
Yeah, you're not going to like it. So,
yeah.
that's how important it is to us because it's our job essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny you talk about, Eli Tomac, just needing everything perfect. It's the same when you and I get on that customer sled and we're going to go just drive it into the trailer. And we can't even drive it in the trailer before we have to adjust the brake lever, adjust the throttle, free play, just all of these things. And we look at the guy like, how do you even ride this thing like this?
Right.
Right.
Yep.
But, well, the dealer set it up like that. I don't know. It's how I've ridden it. So I think to kind of wrap this up, that it's controlling. How did you word it? It's managing. I don't know.
I don't even know what I said.
It's basically managing your setup, managing your situation.
Yeah.
So in the end, it's no bad days.
Yeah.
And we have that saying for a lot of things. We have, that's the go-to for wearing climb gear.
Yeah.
No bad days. You're going to be warm and you're going to be dry. That's the motto with climb, which is awesome. But it's also the same with our sled setup is no bad days. Pay attention to your belt deflection. Pay attention to, do your weight bushings every 500 miles. So, 1,200 miles down the road, you don't stick a roller on the deepest day and you're that guy, you know? And so it's managing all of that stuff. And again, what we truly love and why we do a podcast and we talk about snowmobiles 24/7 is because we really do enjoy helping people have a great experience with this sport. So hit us up in the comments of this podcast with a question. Hit us up on our social media feed. It's really easy to email us. Chris at chrisburandt.com, Ross at chrisburandt.com.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. But, we'd love to hear from you. You can always call the shop and talk to either myself, Ashley, Kyle, and Ross when they're here. We're here to help. We want you to, this sport is ridiculously expensive, and all we're trying to do is to make sure that money that you spend goes wisely, and that you have a good setup. And again, no bad days.
Yep. And this video or this podcast is also on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, then go back and listen to the first one because
there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, and we're still in the progress of getting dialed in. So
cool.
I hear you. I hear the questions. I hear the what we need to work on, how we need to be better. So we're working on it, and hang in there. Thanks for listening.
Awesome. So that wraps up podcast number 6. Why does that timer say? How long have we been doing this, Ross?
20. No, we're probably 40 minutes or 35 minutes.
So I've kind of put it out there. This kind of seems like the sweet spot. I know our boy Kurt up at Next Tech, he said, make them an hour. The hour goes by super fast when we're working in the shop. That means a lot. That means you're not sick of hearing us. But kind of seems like this is the sweet spot, that 35 to 40 minutes. But, again, give us feedback, whether it's positive, negative. We just want to be better. So let us know. And thanks for tuning in. Ross, where can they get us?
Yep. If probably listening on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all 3 there. This one's up on YouTube. We're working on getting all of them up on YouTube once we have our rig set up. And let us know you're listening. We love seeing the Instagram stories, the posts, Facebook posts, tweets. It doesn't matter. Just help us get out there because there's lots of snowmobilers that I think need some info.
Yeah.
We're here to deliver.
Awesome. And then again, in the comments below, post what you want to hear in podcast number 7, and maybe we'll pull yours and make it a show. Thanks, guys.
Lately I've just been